The writer of this is Jeremy Busby, who's been incarcerated in Texas for over 20 years. And I actually just recently was able to interview him, although, of course, the interview was cut short because of prison phone calls are not known for being very accessible or long-winded. So basically, just to give some context here, and this interview will be out next Monday. We're recording this on August 2nd. So if you're listening to this after the fact, starting August 5th or onward, then you can find it at projectcensored.org. So Jeremy Busby is an incarcerated journalist. He started doing journalism in prison and as a way to get the word out about the conditions in prison. Because if you think about it, like, we know some things, but if you think about like the snippets that you know about what's happening in prison, it's like if you knew what was going on in like a corner of one room of your house. That's like how much we're missing on the prison story. And there's actually something very chilling that Jeremy told me on the phone. He said that once when he had written an article, the warden of the prison that he was in at the time brought him into the warden's office, and he pointed to the watchtower and the prison walls, and he said, "Jeremy, do you know why that's there?" And Jeremy said, "Sure, it's to keep the prisoners in." And the warden said, No. It's to keep the public out. You are exposing what's happening in the prisons, and that could be very bad for you. He basically threatened him.
And he said the walls are so that no one learns what goes on in here.
Yeah. And so they have retaliated in horrific ways against Jeremy. He's been, everything from been sprayed with chemical agents to gotten beat severely. He's gotten transferred all around Texas as much as they can because this makes it harder for his legal team in particular to meet with him. They've canceled meetings. They've put him in solitary confinement. This story that I'm sharing now, which was just released earlier this month via the Freedom of the Press Foundation, he was put into solitary confinement for 22 months because of this article. And
22 months?
22 months.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's why he's just sharing it now.
Ugh.
And he talks about how when COVID hit the Texas prison system, they basically put the prisons on lockdown. And so that the inmates were confined to their cells 24 hours a day. So they were kind of in solitary while still not technically being in solitary.
And by the way, just a reminder, for most countries in the world, the ones that you'd consider moderately free, there is no such thing as 24 hours a day in a cage. Like, there are prisons, but the idea of keeping someone in a small room for the entirety of the day is torture, and so they don't do it.
Jeremy talks about how he wasn't able to do his journalism like he had been before because he wasn't allowed to leave his cell, and there was a shortage of staff. So he usually tries to talk to staff about, he interviews people. He's a journalist, and I'll just say that like the amount of physical and emotional and mental retaliation and pain that he's dealt with just because of his journalism makes it remarkable that he continues to do journalism. And he told me on the phone, he's like, the only way that they'll stop me is to kill me. And they've tried. And he said, like, if I ever die, I'm telling everyone I've never been suicidal. And so don't believe them when they tell you it's suicide, because this is something that prisons do very often as well, is that they will kill someone in a corner of the prison where there are no cameras, right? And then they'll just go hang them in their cell or something and say, oh, they committed suicide.
They'll Epstein them.
Yeah, exactly. So basically he talks about in this article what happened when COVID hit, and he talks about how his cellmate at that time had a contraband cell phone. What he started doing is he started using social media. He created pages on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to inform the general public of the conditions that Texas prisoners were experiencing. He even went live on Instagram with a hip hop artist, an activist called Trey the Truth, to detail the plights of the prisoners in Texas prisons. And I bring this specific story up because what happened after that, Texas prison officials responded by issuing bleach, masks, fresh fruit, and hot meals to prisoners and adopting an official COVID-19 protocol from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They also wrote me a disciplinary case and tossed me into solitary confinement for 22 months. This specific story is important because it shows like the power of this kind of journalism. Because obviously when this story came out, when he was using the social media that he had access to and doing Instagram Live with hip hop artists and things like that, he spread the words to such an extent that people in power found it untenable to do anything but issue, let's just call it like basic human rights, like giving them food and masks. They found it untenable to do anything else. And so I bring that up because this to me is like the pinnacle of journalism as power, to force the powers that be to do what you want, because anything other than that would actually be untenable and they would be propelled off of their thrones. And Jeremy has done that. And he continues to do what he does, even though after this, they threw him into solitary confinement for 22 months, almost 2 years, because of this. And he also, talks about how this is just a continuation of the kind of retaliation that he's faced. And now he does not have access to any of the social media that he used to have access to, of course.
Right.
And it's under the guise of security. Now, I wonder what other journalists we've heard this with, be it the Pentagon papers back in the day, or Assange. Oh, well, he put lives at risk. So it's the same, like they don't even change the playbook. They're saying that it's a security issue, that Jeremy is writing these articles, that he's sharing. Bullshit. It's a security risk that he's sharing the fact that you're beating some people to death in cells next to him. Yeah, it's a security problem for the person who just got beat to death. It is bullshit. It is absolute bullshit. But this is the excuse that they use. And it's the excuse that means that people like Jeremy and other incarcerated journalists, somebody mentioned Mumia Abu-Jamal, they have even like the smallest amount of what's left of their human rights in jail and ripped away from them.
And Mumia was a journalist, and many believe that's the reason they framed him for the murder, was because he was a up and coming Black journalist on Black radio and writing, etc., and was having a big impact. And so he was someone that they wanted to lock away. They wanted to shut up. Now, of course, he's continued to do a lot of great journalism and writing from prison, but they've wanted to have him executed for years and years. So
he writes, "The right to freely express oneself, incarcerated or not, is an inalienable right that should never be infringed upon. Government transparency and accountability hinges on incarcerated journalists' ability to report what's happening inside every prison to the general public." Jeremy said to me when I spoke to him, his goal is to make the conditions in prison better for everybody. And the only way you do that is to expose the fact that the conditions there are atrocious in the first place. You can find more about his writing is at, this one's on Freedom of the Press Foundation, which is freedom.press, but you can also find a lot of his writing at joinjeremy.org, as well as his story. And again, like I said, that my interview with him is going to air on August 5th over at projectcensored.org.
Everyone check that out. And I just want to spend a second here to get down to core reality of our prison system in this country, which is the largest prison system in the world, largest prison state in the world. I know you guys are probably tired of me mentioning that like a broken record. I did a segment once where I broke down the number of prisoners, like this many are in for this many are in for this, and how we could get rid of 99% of all prisoners locked up in these prisons in a variety of ways, some of them by not charging them at all, like drug crime should be a health issue rather than a crime issue, stuff like that. I was able, through just looking at the percentages, and many people are locked up because they haven't even had a trial or a hearing or anything yet, which is supposed to be illegal. What happened to innocent until proven guilty? Oh, we don't do that anymore. Like a third of all prisoners have not actually been found guilty yet. Anyway, you go through the list of why these, over 2 million people are locked up, and you can get it down to like 5 people in every town in America. Well, there's 20,000 cities in this country. So you have 5 people, which would mean it'd be a little house with like 2 murderers and 3 rapists, and that'd be it.
Sounds a lot like the Greek houses in a college town.
The frat houses, yeah.
Couple rapists.
Couple murders, yeah.